I grew up on a ranch. My dad was always very good about teaching us different things about it. I was always interested. He always let us try our new ideas. And then I bought a few cows, I think in 1974, and then just kind of kept adding after that.
I did not grow up on a ranch, but I was in a small town. So I guess I'm kind of like the pioneer woman, an accidental country girl now.
I have been blessed with ranch life nearly all of my life.
There's no place I'd rather find myself on a beautiful sunny day than on the back of a horse messing with cattle.
I can't tell you how much I enjoy it. It's entirely different than any other lifestyle that I've ever been exposed to, and it's a wonderful way to live.
It's so peaceful out here, working with all of the animals. Growing up, I always had cats and dogs and rabbits. My brother had chickens and all sorts of different poultry.
Oh, I had ducks, chickens. We'd be haying and I'd come over a duck nest and I'd tell Dad I gotta stop and take them home. And I'd take them to the incubator and hatch them out, raise the ducks, and they'd come back for 2-3 years and then disappear. But everything you can imagine, we're raising out here.
Zach, who's 32, I believe now, almost 33, he was probably about 3 years old, and he had a little chicken. My wife taught school, and she hatched out a bunch of eggs, and I think only one of them turned out. He had a dozen eggs and got one little black chick out of it. And so, of course, she brought it home and gave it to Zach, and he named it Spring Chicken. And he just loved that little chicken, and that chicken just loved him, and he'd follow Zach all over the yard and out through the grass, and he'd take a little stick and he'd brush the grass and get the bugs to jumping out of there, and then that little chick would run over there and grab those bugs and eat them. And
we had just planted a couple of tree lots, and so I was out picking weeds out of the tree lot, and all of a sudden I hear this blood-curdling scream.
I was hitting the tree to try and get the bugs out, and I was talking to Mom, and I hit the chicken, lost my favorite chicken.
So of course he was just so upset and crying, and he said, "Dad will never let me have chickens again." But we found a place to bury him and had a little funeral for Spring Chicken.
But we raised chickens every year. Dad would always get new chickens. A lot of fun.
We're gonna move to a ranch.
We've talked about having a lot of chickens and pigs and want to get them, a little bit of everything when we get out here so they can experience the different types of animals. Zyla's more outgoing outside than kids that I've known that are raised in town. Doesn't take her much to get her hands in and dirty. One thing that I've noticed with her, just the things that she sees that most kids wouldn't be able to handle. The death of an animal, she's really been able to get through them.
It just teaches you the circle of life at a young age. And you also kind of become the jack of all trades. You're not only a caretaker of your animals, but you have to become a bookkeeper and a plumber and a mechanic. And I guess the ranching life just gives you good work ethic, and it also teaches you how to adapt to change, whether you like it or not. You can use those traits that you've learned throughout the years for many other things, throughout life.
I wouldn't have had a job in construction if it wasn't for what I learned with Dad, and he taught you everything. Ever since I think I was 4 years old when I had to start riding horses and going with him, and he made sure you learn before you're 10 years old. You had to learn how to do everything.
There's a lot of unexpected things that could happen, and
it's never the same thing, same 2 days in a row.
I took a youth loan out with the Farm Service Agency when I was about 14 years old, and bought 5 cows, and that Dad had given me a few cows before that, and that just made me grow my herd. I used my calves from all those cows to pay for my college tuition. But now I'm trying to work on building my herd and eventually becoming probably a full-time rancher.
It's not easy to up and just have cattle, especially after a spring like we've had, losing as many calves as we have had to snowstorms and mostly mud. Actually, you'll lose more calves in the mud, but you just can't fully depend on a cattle income sometimes because the market can go up and down or anything can happen. I mean, it's a live animal. Storm Atlas took huge numbers of herds. We're hoping that eventually someday we can build our herd up enough to where we can kind of just be out here and do this full time.
And having the grandkids here on the ranch is just, I sure love having them around. And our little granddaughter, she's 6 now, and she's been helping us horseback for probably 2 or 3 years now, I guess.
I like to ride horses with my family.
She's getting to be a pretty good little hand, and it's just a great feeling for our grandpa to take his little granddaughter out and get her out and moving cattle and sorting cattle, and she likes her horses and likes working cattle. And our little grandson is only about 2, but I think his time's coming. He'll be outside, but he might be more of a motorcycle kid. I don't know. But I really love having the grandkids out here. They're moving. They're building a house out about a mile north of where we live at here now, so they'll be close by. I'm really looking forward to that.
Kids are always exciting. They make life exciting.
Your whole hand.
We'll get to enjoy them a lot more often, I'm sure, having them so nice and close.
Your grandparents teach you everything, really. You always want to learn from your grandparents. Everything they've done, you try to be like your grandpa. You never will be, but my grandpa's done a lot of stuff, and hopefully I can kind of make him happy, even though he's not here anymore.
We're really excited to be moving out here, and I finally get to let my kids really enjoy the country life. It's a much better place for kids as active as mine.
Oh, you can't beat it, really. It's just in the city they just can't go anywhere. They have boundaries, and out here they can go explore, and they love bottle feeding calves, and they just learn so much more on a ranch.
I know when we were kids growing up in Eagle Butte, we could go, as we got a little older, and my cousins would come out and play with us. We'd run out in the pasture till it got dark and go build forts and out with the broken or dead tree branches, build little hideouts and forts and run over, 100 acres or something. I guess we could go about wherever we wanted to. When we got home, time for supper, mostly intact.
She eats out of Zyla's hand. So she's passed this straight down to her. All right, one more.
The difference between a cow and a heifer is, I guess you can call it a newborn. It can be a heifer calf, and then they grow into yearlings or yearling heifers, and then we get them bred, and they're 2-year-old heifers. And once they have their first calf, I guess that's when they formally become a cow. The yearling heifers, we AI for 5 days or a week until we think we've got enough of them bred, and then we'll turn in cleanup bulls on them. And sometimes we only breed our heifers for 30 to 40 days, something like that, so they calve out in a short time in the spring, and we don't have to get up at night for such a long stretch. We turn our bulls out with our cows, but on the cows, we'll calve those for 50 to 60 days. And but we don't have very much trouble calving cows. Most of the time they take care of themselves. We just get them ear tagged and keep grass in front of them and protein. In the spring when we're calving, we usually start about the middle of March with the 2-year-old heifers, and we watch them around the clock, or at least every 2 to 3 hours.
When the calf starts to come out, they come out with their 2 front feet out first, and the nose will be tucked up in between there, and then the rest of the calf will follow behind. Our help is called pulling the calf, and it could be anything from just grabbing onto the feet and gently pulling all the way to where we have to put the cow into a set of blocks into a stall and use a chain on the feet to extract the calf.
We have a camera system, just a home security system that we have installed in the barn and in the corrals, so we can watch it from a computer or a smartphone. Little calves can't take cold weather, especially cold wet weather or in the snow. So we try to get them into the barn and get them dried off and get some first milk in them, and then they get moved out to the pasture, and they're kind of on their own after that with their moms. And then we make room for the next one until we get done. Cows we calve out in the pasture. We check them during the day several times. We put ear tags in them and give them an overeating shot to the newborn calf. We get what they call purple gut or enterotoxemia from that real fresh high protein milk, and so we give them that shot to keep from killing the calves. Once they get up and get going, then we usually go out and pair them out and put them into another pasture and just keep the drop bunch or the ones that are calving in a smaller pasture so we can keep an eye on them. And we move them, try to keep everything moved to clean ground as often as we can to avoid a scour problem. We haven't really had much for scour problems over the years, but we try to take some extra steps to prevent that. Microbial scours, it's a bad case of diarrhea, the scours are. Sometimes twins are a little more confusing to the cows. We don't get very many on our place. I don't know if it's even 1%, maybe 2% some years. Sometimes they'll have 2, and they might get them both up and get them going, and then they just start to love one, or I guess maybe they realize they can't raise both of them, so they'll just take one and leave the other one. So you kind of got to watch them pretty close and keep that other one picked up if it gets bummed.
Bringing them home in the calf sled thing that you put the baby in the calf sled to drag the baby home, so the old mama cow would follow right behind and get them in the barn and rub them with gunny sacks if they were really cold, and
get it to another mother, and we'll graft it over to maybe a cow that has lost a calf, or a 2-year-old heifer that's lost a calf. We'll graft them over. As far as grafting a calf over, there's various things products you can buy to kind of fool the cow into thinking that she still has a live calf, and it works pretty well if they want another calf, and if they don't, almost nothing works. Some people will skin them out and take the hide off of the old calf and put on the new one until the mother accepts it. But smell is the main way that they identify their own calves.
It's a lot of work, a lot of hours, nights, you know, and storms are a lot worse, but nothing better than seeing those little baby calves.
We have a neighbor that built us a couple of calf shelters that we put out for the 2-year-olds, and they're just low, probably 5 feet tall or something. They got a low door of maybe 3 feet tall, and the little calves can go in there and get some shelter. And we try to keep dry hay in there so they get out of the cold, wet snow or cold, wet rain and wind. We always have plenty of wind in this country. We ear tag our calves as soon as they're born with the same number as their mother so we can identify them. If we have a storm or they have a little bit of a mix-up, we know which calf belongs to which cow. And so if we can catch that calf and then go find the cow and put them back together if she can't seem to find her own calf. So we have a calving book that we just keep in the ear tag box, and as a calf is born, we'll write the cow's number down, the color of the cow, which would either be black or black-white face or bronco face, and then the date that the calf is born, the color of the calf, and then the weight of the calf, and we usually weigh a few in the spring, so we have a pretty good idea what they look like, and kind of estimate the rest, because we're not purebred breeders or raise anything registered. They're mostly black Angus, a little bit of Hereford mixed in occasionally on some of them. They're like the red ones and maybe the white faces. And then if we give them any shots or any antibiotic or anything, then we record that in that little book. Another thing that we write down too is if there's a cow that's real aggressive towards us while we're tagging her calf, we'll make a note of that, so we kind of either aware of it for the next year, or if we need to sell a few cows, if we have too many or something for the grass we have, if it's a dry year, then those are the kind of things that go to town. Even though they're doing their job protecting their calf, it's kind of unhealthy for us if they're very aggressive, very overly aggressive. We calve out all of our own heifers, and then we keep them until they're about 10 years old, and then we sell them when they're still fairly marketable.
We try to only keep cows that have good mothering genetics and skills, because not only if she's not taking care of her baby, that baby will then grow up and not take care of her baby, and we've just given ourselves exponentially more challenges.
We cull our cows by, I guess basically if they don't raise a calf, then we sell them. They don't get to stay at all if they don't raise a calf. If they don't breed back, or if they lose a calf in the spring, or if they have a bad feet or bad eyes or lumps or any kind of a flaw, we try to keep cows that are fairly sound and can travel good for moving from pasture to pasture. To help us decide when to move cattle from pasture to pasture is based on the kind of grass. We have a crested wheatgrass that's very early in the spring, so we can graze that off, and then we go to our favorite grass is western wheatgrass, and then there's buffalo grass is good. They're a little bit later season and holds their protein better, longer, more palatable. We usually try to figure about 30 acres per cow in this country. Our pastures are kind of limited for the number of cattle, probably more by water than they are by grass. When we first moved here, the place that we bought had very little water on it, and some neighbors were very gracious and give us access to a well they had that was about 3/4 of a mile away. And they let us hook onto that and run a pipeline over to the house and out into the pasture a little ways. And so we used that water for quite a number of years. And just last year we dug a deep well and put in some pipeline out to different pastures to help ensure that the cattle have a good drink of water through the dry years. But basically dams is what we've used all of our lives. We've got a few springs, but mostly dams. So you kind of try to adjust the number of cattle to the availability of the water. We usually kind of keep them in smaller groups so they can all have good access to water. The grass, they can kind of spread out and get what they want when they need it, and we try not to overgraze our pastures, and so they have plenty of that available. Unless it's covered with snow, then we'll sometimes have to feed a little hay. We usually don't feed any hay to the cows unless we have deep snow, or sometimes we bring them into smaller pastures for calving. We'll roll out a little bit of hay, and some days we'll roll it out for the little baby calves to lay on to get them up out of the cold, wet snow or wet grass. We live in an area that some years it doesn't rain very much, and but we get to put up hay most years. We had about a 7-year run of dry years. We didn't get very much hay. We bought a little bit in those years, but primarily we adjust our cattle numbers to just graze year round. We try not to feed too much hay to the cows. We feed a 20% protein cube throughout the winter, and then we keep mineral available and salt. But we do put up a fair amount of hay, or try to keep extra hay in case we have where the snow would cover up the grass and the cows couldn't have access to it. And then we feed our own heifer calves through the winter, sometimes a few steers. So we always try to put up enough hay to feed the calves. They just got to have a little bit extra care. And then sometimes the coming 2-year-olds, and the bulls are actually not near as tough as the cow. They've got to have a lot more care than the cows do. And we usually hay the bulls from, at least Christmas time. Sometimes 1st of December we'll start haying them. But we might start feeding the protein cube in November to the bulls to kind of keep them in good condition. In the cold winter season, we feed about a 20% protein pellet or a cube, and it's got grain in it, corn and various products, and of course the protein is upped to the 20% level. And we do feed quite a bit of mineral. In the spring we try to feed a high phosphorus, high calcium mineral to help with the breed back to get the cows back in shape for breeding in June and July. The feed we were feeding to those cattle in the feedlot was a mixture of ground hay, which that was a mixture of alfalfa and grass, and then we have some silage we bought from a neighbor that grows corn and chops the silage for feed. Then we had a little grain and soybeans for protein, and distiller's grain to make it a complete feed for growing cattle. We don't feed any fat cattle here, but we do try to grow out some yearling heifers. The equipment availability now has made it so one guy can take care of a lot more cattle than what it used to be. Like in my dad's time, they'd feed with a 4-horse team, and they'd pitch all the hay onto a wagon or bobsled and then haul it a couple miles and pitch it off and go get another load. But you're pretty limited on how many cattle you can have. You're kind of limited by your equipment, and one guy can take care of a lot of cattle now without too much effort and still get back to the house in time for dinner.
The role that horses play in a cattle operation has really changed. The horse's role is in working and moving cattle. The role of the machine is in working and moving material to support the cattle.
We got an ATV here a few years ago, a 4-wheeler. We had a bad blizzard in October which killed a lot of our cattle, and it knocked down a lot of fence. The weight of the snow crushes the fence, and we had already gone over it in the spring and it was all fixed up and good, but it smashed so much of it down, and since we don't have a team anymore and you couldn't get around with a pickup or a tractor, it was just so muddy, and the snow kind of melted, but the mud was a real problem. So we got a 4-wheeler so we could get around some of that fence and get it fixed back up to hold the cattle in our winter pastures.
With these vehicles, you can carry anything you would need for fencing: posts, slammers, wire. You can carry tag boxes, and one of the big things that we carry with us all the time is some way to doctor the cattle when you're out there in the field.
But the horses, I think it's hard for us to give those up. Time is kind of an important thing, but still, we still like to use the horses. We prefer that way, and they work by far the best for sorting, and I think for gathering, at least in smaller areas. The 4-wheelers, I guess you can run around the outside of the pastures, but it just seemed like people have too much power with a ATV that they can push on the cattle too hard. It's just too easy to be too hard on the cattle. With a horse, you kind of go along the same speed, which you can overdo it with a horse too.
The cattle act differently when they're being moved slowly and gradually and comfortably with a horse or a group of horses versus that machine that's pretty intimidating and kind of scary for them.
You're still gonna have to have a horse if you got something that needs roped. You can't dally on to a steering wheel of a side-by-side. You gotta have something that you can dally onto and hold the cow if you need to. I'm glad I won't be here in 50 years, but it'll be interesting to see what this country is like in 50 years.
tell you about our old dog, Scrappy, here, and I think he's about 12 years old now, getting kind of old, but he's hard to tell by looking at him. He was the best cow dog we ever had. My daughter got him in town. She wanted to bring him out here, and I said, well, what was he? And told me, and his legs are, of course, really short. He was about, I can't remember if he was 6 months old or about a year old, and I told her, I said, I don't want that little freak out here, because I said he'll never even keep up with a saddle horse.
But we brought him home, and he took a liking to Jerry, and he slept next to him in the bed all weekend. And Lindsay and I went to work on Monday morning, and he took off with Jerry to do chores, and he never ever wanted to come back in the house.
He turned out to be a wonderful cow dog, but he can actually keep up with a saddle horse quite good.
So he's become head of the ranch security around here.
One time I went to get the horses in, I think it was in January, and we were going to move some cattle, and I went to wrangle the horses, and I usually just used the pickup when there was too much deep snow, and he was with me, and I stopped out shaking a cake bucket at the next pasture next to where the horses were, and he kept looking at me, and he'd look at the horses, and he'd look at me, and look at the horses, and I thought, well, I didn't know what he was thinking for sure, but I said, do you want to go get those horses? And he just took off running after him, and it took probably half a dozen more times to get him down there to him, and he got around behind him, and he ran him out by the road. Actually, they ran over top of him kind of once, and he got him turned around, and they went back towards the road. So I went back towards home, and I got the gate open. And when I got up there to get the gate open, he had the horses at the gate. So he brought them in for us anyway, so we could have horses to move the cows home with. But in reality, we probably didn't need the horses as much as I thought, because he pretty much brought the cows down the road when we moved them anyway. Yeah, I wanted to. Ready, Austin?
South Dakota has a law that requires cattle to carry a hot brand in order to be sold. In order for us to work efficiently after branding, what we do is, prior to the branding process, we sext the pairs.
We take our steer calf pairs to one pasture, or one part of the place, and then the heifer calf pairs to another. And then we moved them into close pastures so we could set up just one set of portable corrals, and then we branded 3 different bunches, and we could bring one bunch in down a fence line into a corner, and then use that same facility for the next 2 bunches.
And then when we leave, we put them into pastures where they'll be with their same sexed calves.
We always sell almost all of our steers every fall at about 500 or 600 pounds, and then we keep our heifer calves through the winter, and then we choose our replacement heifers out of that group that are to become cows. So when we get ready in the spring to brand, we just sort them ahead of time and then take them to those summer pastures that way. So when we get ready to sell in the fall, we don't have to gather and sort everything from other distant pastures.
and then hauled from different places the day that we sell.
On branding day, the cattle are brought in pairs, meaning a cow and a calf. Typically, the calf will be about 2 to 3 months old and weigh something in the range of 80 to 90 pounds. They are brought into a series of corrals where they're separated, and the cows are sent down a working alley where they will receive one vaccination.
And then we put a pour-on on them to kill the lice and to kill any parasites, so they don't inside or outside.
The cow is then released out of the head gate and generally will stay in the immediate area waiting to be reunited with their calves. The calves are in a separate pen, and cowboys will ride in to the pen, rope the calves, and in the ranching terminology, the calves are then drugged to the fire. In the old days, the branding irons used to be heated on fire, on an open pit fire. In today's modern world, we use stoves with a propane tank. 2 cowboys or cowgirls to what we call wrangle or wrestle the calf, and they do that. One person will pull on their hind legs, the other person will prevent the head and the front feet from flopping around while the vaccination, castration, and branding process is taking place.
So we actually gave them 4 shots. One was a wormer to help clean up any lice that may be on them or any worms in the calves that they got from their own mothers.
We give them several respiratory shots, and then again in August we'll give them a booster shot, and then we wean them in September, October.
And as each vaccination is applied, the person giving the injection will mark the calf with a colored crayon. The reason for that is that there are 3, 4, 5 calves coming out at a time, and with as frenetic and as excited a pace as there is, it's hard for the people giving the vaccination to remember whether they vaccinated a particular calf or not. So they'll mark the calf, and then they can tell that the calf has been vaccinated with their particular vaccination. Once that's done, that process of vaccinating, castrating, and branding has been done, which generally takes 45 seconds to a minute. The calf is let up off the ground and freed to reunite with their mother, who's standing usually in the immediate area.
I helped brand since I was, I think, 3.
Usually I do the branding irons, but sometimes Jerry taught me how to cut calves last year. So every once in a while I'll jump in and do that when they're a little bit behind, or just kind of look around and see whoever needs help, or whatever's behind, keep the production going.
I was wrestling calves and branding and whatever else needed to be done. Something happened, go do that.
I tried roping and dragging a few, but had to knock the rust off for a while. It's been a while.
It's a good community that we live in. All of our neighbors are very willing and helpful when we need them, and we repay the favor to them when they need the help, such as brandings, help each other brand.
When you got a good crew together, usually things go pretty smooth, and Jerry's always got a good crew of help.
That's just pretty much how you are as a rancher.
The day after we brand, we always take one bunch of calves over, or cows and calves, over to a lease that we have on Box Elder Creek. This group happens to all be heifer calves, and we trail them about 3 miles over to Box Elder Creek and get them on summer grass. We'll move them around to different pastures in that particular area throughout the summer.
As far as predators, coyotes have been a real problem for us in the past. I know one year they killed several calves for us. I think it was about 10 of them. What we've had trouble here recently is with some cows that are still calving, the coyotes get into them and get them all stirred up. They're probably coming in just to eat the afterbirth, or if there happens to be a dead calf or something. But they come into them, and the cows with the new mamas with their new babies get pretty upset, and we've had a couple of mix-ups between bunches here in the last few days, and some fence tore down, and so the coyotes are really a nuisance. And I know they got to eat too, but they sure cause a lot of extra work for us.
Rattlesnakes are something we always are constantly on the lookout for and worry, because we have had some come right into the yard. A couple years ago, we were over picking choke cherries, which is kind of a precious commodity around here. I was picking along, and all of a sudden I felt my foot kind of slip a little, and I looked down and there was a rattlesnake all coiled up. So I headed as quickly as I could to get out of there. And of course Jerry came and got the whip out and got it taken care of. So that was pretty precious choke cherry juice that year, because that was a close call.
There was one specific time last summer we found like a 5-foot bull snake in the yard, and Zyla was the one that found it, and it wasn't very long before one of our dogs was right on it, kind of in between her and the snake.
I would say ranching definitely is not for the faint of heart. There's highs and there's lows. It's really hard to go through a hard winter and lose a lot of cattle. It can get depressing at times, but it's something that you have to push through if you really enjoy it, and it's definitely not a money maker. So you ranch up for passion.
Livestock got to eat every day and have care every day, just like us. So you don't get a lot of days off. You can take time off throughout the day and get most of a day off, but if you're not here to take care of the livestock, somebody has to be. So you have to line up, and we're lucky we have a lot of good friends that come in and help us, and family, of course, and that really helps for them to come in and look after things while we're gone. And my wife's retired now, so we're kind of hoping to take a little bit more time to do a few fun things and let somebody else worry about some of the day-to-day things. I'm not ready to leave yet. I still like what I do. I've always liked it, and don't really want to give that up yet until I have to.
I hope this looks steep in your video. People that have more hay ground can probably get by with a little bit less, probably 20 to 25. That's a neighbor's dog.
Oh, not you. That's my brother's dog. He lives a mile down the road. Are you the glue that holds this whole operation together?
Absolutely. You know, there's not a lot gets done when I'm not here. Yeah, you better edit that shit out. Jerry will kick my ass.
Yeah, not
yeah. One. There's a lot of inappropriate things go on, but it's good natured out here at least.
Les Moore from Sturgis, South Dakota, and Dell is my youngest sister. Don't tell nobody, but Jared's my brother-in-law. Remember Mike got locked in the bar? Remember that?
Yeah.
Nobody knew where Mike was. He was locked into hutches.
And he's okay with that.
Yeah.